programming, you do not have space for programming. And I have had people say, programming, it doesn't matter, they're a criminal, they're always gonna be a criminal. Again, short-sighted. There may very well be some in that population that you are spot on. There may very well be some of those that that's not the case. There's an event or a situation that happened in their life and they make the wrong decision, and programming, meaning that somebody comes in there, whatever their situation is, and to be able to help them correct that situation that's going on in their life. You do not have the space in your campus right now to do that. The building that would be proposed would give you essentially a classroom so that those events could be dealt with and you could deal with your population to be able to help with the programming. So here are some things, again, these are on the website, so I won't spend a lot of time for you, spend a lot of time on, but I do want to highlight them. You do have water infiltration into the building, you've got plumbing leaks throughout the building, you've got a generator that isn't properly exhausted. There's a whole lot of things that are going on with your building that above and beyond the classification piece. Your building is 40 years old and it's situations that it needs to be addressed. These bars, for those of you that don't spend time in jail, that's good, but these bars that are here is an antiquated situation. I always make the joke about people that seen jails have seen the Andy Griffith Show and their bars were there. Yeah, they were. These bars are no longer utilized or put into jails that are being constructed. There are jails, obviously, like yours that have them, but what this situation is right here, it's a tie-off point. Meaning that it's a huge suicide issue that somebody can take the sheet from their bed and find a way to be able to deal with the suicide element. Jails now, even the hinges on the doors, those are beveled so that there isn't a hanging point. Curtains that are in the showers, they actually have tear-away components so that you can't hang from those elements if there's a weight restriction before they break away. So there's a lot of things that are put into that. Your receiving cells, you only have 2 of them. So here's what happens. The receiving cells, when you only have 2 of them, and the patrol bring in a fresh arrest. If you have that fresh arrest, and there's already somebody in that receiving cell, you have to find a place to put them. What happens in this receiving cell is while they go through this booking process, they have a period of time while they classify them, while they wait for their court before they actually decide if they're going to put them in the general population. If you don't have the space to put them in here, what do your jailers do? Here's what happens. Those individuals are taken out of this early and they're put into general population because you don't have enough receiving cells to manage your population and you are dealing with misclassification immediately. It happens. Here's not the only building that does it in the state, but it's happening because of your limited receiving cells. This is just a tight space in regards to there's no lack of space. There is no pre-book area, so you can see back in here, and it's hard to see, but there's a scanner, so there's a body scan that has been put into your jail. Individual comes in, they actually will scan them to make sure that there's nothing on them, in them, to deal with getting them into the jail. After that's done, there's typically a pre-book area so that the arresting officer can deal with it. You don't have that. Everything's packed right in the corner and you're right by that booking officer station where if there is an event, because that individual doesn't want to be arrested, you have limited space to be able to deal with that. It's a confined space for the function that's happening in the jail. This element over here is just highlighting the limited space and obviously the bars that are tied into that. This is your view down your hallway. This is what you're seeing from your officer station. You're seeing down a hallway. You're not seeing into those cells. You're not seeing into those ties because of what you have for your linear jail. The Sally Port hallway, this Sally Port configuration, you're coming in from where the squad is, you're walking down this narrow corridor over to an elevator. Your building, your jail is on the 2nd floor. So I'm being arrested, Phil's hauling me in, I'm not thrilled about it, and I'm flopping around, throwing a fit, gotta drag me down that hallway into a tight elevator and close the door. So now we're in a wrestling match up this elevator until we get to the jail officers to be able to assist with that. It's a huge liability component in regards to who's the arresting officer and who's the individual that's being arrested. A lot of issues that are associated with that. This dispatch center door, and this is actually in dispatch, you have dispatch and master controller combined. That is an issue, but it's not an issue that we're addressing because of an increase in staff, so we're accommodating that in the design, but that's an issue. This element on your dispatch center, there is one single door. What you need to have there is that is the heartbeat of your county. If somebody walks by as somebody who's being arrested, if that door just gets cracked open, that individual can get into that dispatch center and cause complete chaos with all your computer systems that's in dispatch. There should be a secure vestibule, meaning that this door I walk into, the door locks behind me, and then it has to be unlocked to get into the next one. It's another breach in regards to what security or the safety of how it's designed. This inmate storage or changeover, you can see the narrow spot in regards to where that changeover is for those inmates that come into booking. There is no space in there for them to be able to change over. This medical room, you have one room, which is supposed to be three. There's supposed to be an exam room, there's supposed to be a nurse's office, and there's supposed to be a medication space for you to have medication under 3 locks so that individuals can't get into the medication that's there. And then this inmate emergency call button, you can see where this is, the officer's outside, and this is where the button is. You can't get to it. So it's not really an emergency button, it's only an emergency button for the officer, it's not for an inmate. Your court connection, we've got door configurations in regards to where it causes your officer to turn your back. You have a court holding cell that is not compliant. You can't even use it right now because of DOC. It's not compliant. It's just sitting there. It's not able to be used. And then your court officers in regards to all of this is out exposed to the access of the inmates. Again, exposure to what's happening. It should not be exposed in those hallways. So the proposed solution, this is the rendering, and I got a video that we'll play here in a second, but this is the rendering. This is looking up Minor Ave. This is the courthouse, this would be the skywalk, and then this is the jail housing. This jail housing piece that's tied right here. All of the exterior of this building is proposed to be precast concrete. Precast concrete is obviously a secure perimeter. It's also something that will stand the test of time in regards to the duration of the build. But a lot of them have been put in precast concrete because what's been happening on the masonry or the block side is that in the market right now, the talented masons are starting to decline, and we're seeing that there are less masons available, so the cost of masonry has gone up versus what the precast is. So this is a market thing where this would be the most cost effective to go with precast panels. We still are gonna have some CMU in there because we've gotta get them around the doors and configurations, but limiting that is the components that are tied into that.
1 second, Kurt, because I know it's been questions. Around the housing pod, there's no windows, so the inmates can't see out, but we do have a requirement for natural lighting. So there'll be skylights on the roof, and they come down for the natural lighting into those housing pods.
Okay. So just some of the things that were tied into that, this address inmate classification issues. The year where we place this gives, I should have talked about that on location. It gives you an opportunity to be able to expand this courthouse and renovate rather than being crammed on one block, and then it is on county-owned property, so we're not dealing with acquisition of private property. We'll have a video here that'll play.
The members of the Rusk County Board are encouraging your feedback regarding the proposed Rusk County Jail. The 2-story jail addition looks to utilize the existing Rusk County-owned property across Minor Avenue to the south of the current law enforcement center. The 2 facilities will be connected by a skywalk to create a link between the jail and the courts. The Rusk County Jail will include a 2-level housing pod, along with related support services. At the southernmost end of the block is a secure sally port and building services loading dock. Keeping all of these jail-related functions in one building addresses the current operational and staffing inefficiencies in the current jail facility. By constructing the Rusk County Jail in this location, it allows future generations greater options to address replacement, improvements, or updates to the current county courthouse. The design for the new jail is straightforward, yet weaves in a contemporary style that remains contextual with its neighbors. Rusk County Sheriff's personnel, County Board supervisors, and county administration all provided insights on the can reference the website ruskcountyjailproject.com, all one word, to understand more why this project is essential for the growth and revitalization of our communities. Additionally, a green space across 3rd Street can serve as a community square, accommodating festivals, concerts, and special events for bringing the community together. Please consider making the time to join one of the community listening sessions to learn more about the project and ask any questions that you may have. Thank you.
So a couple things that have been brought up or questions that have been raised through either the website or through the meeting last night. Adjacent properties that are east of where the proposed building would be. Right now, there is no consideration of acquisition of those, but that has been one of the main things that's come up multiple times about the potential devaluing of those properties and what's gonna be done with those properties. I can tell you right now, that's not a decision that the board has made yet, because we haven't decided any of this, but we would carry that over to the board for consideration. There's concern about where that is. The other element is the green space across the street. It's there for your consideration, for the board to consider. Not that it has to be there for jail requirements, but everything that's happening in that area, in regards to where that parking space would be, it would be an opportunity for you to utilize that space. And then just showing those veterans memorials and flags that were there, obviously those are just things for consideration. In essence, it would be a pretty plain Jane precast building that would be put in that facility to serve its purpose as a jail. Okay. Tax impact, probably the main reason why everybody is here. So, working with Baird, the financial advisor for the county, the project is a $38.5 million job to be able to build the jail. That includes all of the costs associated with building the jail, all the professional fees and costs for submittal to the state, all those elements that are tied into that are included in that number. That borrowing of $38.5 million would be a 20-year general obligation borrowing, and the impact to you, the taxpayers, would be 73 cents per $1,000 of evaluation. So if you have a $100,000 evaluated property, it would cost you $73 a year. They have it broken down per month, so it'd be $6.08 per month. Now the average value of property within Rusk County is $173,750. That ends up being $10.57 a month. Now the way that works is that borrowing is something that will be brought before the county. There'll be multiple ways for them to look at what they're borrowing, whether they do it all in one time over multiple years. But essentially, this isn't a general obligation borrowing that can pay for this project. You can't borrow money on the general obligation to address operations. Operations has to be done through the operating budget, and this can be done through a borrowing budget. It's a key component when we start talking about different solutions for how do we solve the case that you have going on here. They do have another chart here, which we won't dive into, but ultimately they're showing the different bond issuances of when they would borrow. There is a CIP portion that's shown here. If you look on this, when you get on the website, this is a capital improvement projects budget that the county would have to take action on every year. So the discussion here is, can we borrow more, or once we borrow this, are we locked in, we can't borrow anymore? You can borrow much more. It's just a matter of when and if you want to borrow it. But every time you would borrow for those other small borrowings, it would be a tax or a mill rate impact in regards to how this looks. Now, I will tell you that you have to understand that your property taxes aren't all county tax. Your property taxes are split into whatever municipality you're in that are tied into that. So understand that what other groups besides your county does, the school, the municipality, would be other impacts besides this. This is just what your county portion of your taxes would be. So it's a mill rate impact of that 73 cents per thousand. So I put in this construction inflation, cause a lot of times what I run into is counties like yours haven't done a project for quite some time. And there's a reason for that, is that county board members are put in a tough spot. Because when they start to talk about borrowing money to do something in the county, people say, I don't want my taxes to be raised. We get it, understand it, and I deal with it on counties all the time. So that's why you will see more times than not, when I get into counties, there is a need for a building that has been there for quite some time. For that very purpose. Don't wanna borrow money, let's find a way to get that done. The reality is that every year that you wait to do a project, inflation goes up. I think you all know what you're dealing with right now in inflation, in your world, in your life. Construction inflation averages between 5 to 10%, depending on the project that you're building. We have seen huge jumps in the last 3 years, especially in correctional construction. So I just wanted to show that at a 5% inflation, if that's the cost of it this year, if you wait a year, it gets up to 40.5. If you wait 10 years, that number is at 59.7, and that's only 5% inflation. If it is an 8% inflation, that number goes from 38 this year to in 10 years at 76. What I have run into is more times than not, that 10-year, 15 or 20-year time frame is what those counties should have or could have built, but they delayed because they were gonna save money. When they looked at that tax impact, that tax impact was based on if they did it today between a 4 and a 4.5% borrowing. So every year that you're paying that interest on there, if you wait a year and it's 5% inflation, you've just lost 1%. If it's 8% inflation, you've just lost 4% because you didn't address the need. So I know borrowing is something that we don't like to do, but you gotta understand that from this perspective, the county, if they had to raise 59, if they waited 10 years and said, we're not gonna borrow any money, we're gonna raise the money to get to $59 million, because that's what we're forecasting that it's gonna be there, you would never get that in regards to being able to save the money based on what your taxes are and being able to tie it up. So borrowing is something that's been done. Now, I will tell you that governments, counties can borrow at a more, a better interest rate than you as an individual. And they typically are a significant difference, right? So right now they're forecasting something to 4 to 4.5%. If you went out to get a mortgage right now, you're not in that realm. Obviously there's different situations that impact that, but that gives you an idea of what it looks like. To learn more, we do have the project website. Some of you may have already viewed it. You can go there and take a look at it. If you've got questions coming out of here, it gives you the contact information. So if you go onto the very back page, you can type in whatever your comment is. It will come to our staff. We then will distribute it to county staff for a response. And then all of those questions or comments that come in, we will then present to the county board when we meet with them to give them a summary of how the communication plan went. So your comments are being heard. We're responding to them as we can. And then if you have more coming through that, you can either contact us through there or get a hold of your county board supervisor. So open it up for questions and answers. Is it hot in here, or is it just me? Yes, sir.
Okay, you talked about all these standards and you used the letters DOC. Who are they and where do they come from? Are they state or federal?
State Department of Correction.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they can direct us to do these things.
So, yeah, so.
And the magic thing I'll add to it is it seems like the state is requiring to do this, they would put some money into it.
Yeah. That's a great question. It comes up on every county that we've dealt with this, because you're not the only county that's dealing with this
I
right now.
understand.
And it's referred to as an unfunded mandate. I've heard people say this is an unfunded mandate from the state. The reality is that this code has been there since 2014. So it's 10 years old. It's not like it was just yesterday. And you haven't been compliant with it for some years, okay? Meaning that you had 10 years to figure it out to be able to comply with it, and most counties have not. The reality is that there's a lot of state requirements that the state does require the county to do, but you don't get funding for it. If you have updates in your building and you gotta comply with ADA, you gotta do that, you can't go to the state and get funding. There's even programs within your county that you are required by state to provide to your constituents, but the state doesn't give you the money to be able to fund that. So, you are right, the DOC is requiring you to do so. They required you to do so 10 years ago, and we don't have a game plan for it. So it's not like they dropped it on us yesterday. You've been dinged on it several times through your jail inspection report, and it's getting to the point now where they aren't going to allow you to continue the way you are. And if nothing is done, what will happen, because you have double bunking in your jail right now, if nothing is done and you say, we're not gonna do anything with our jail, what the DOC is gonna do is they're gonna pull your double bunking, meaning that you're gonna go down to one individual within cell blocks. So your bed count that's 52 will drop down to 18. The key component about that is that you only have an 18 bed jail, but you are considered full when you're at 85% of that capacity. The reason for that is that you have to have beds available when a fresh arrest comes in, and that 85% rule. So your 18 bed jail will be full when you're about at 12 or 13. So the decisions that you make moving forward will have implications. And we'll get into some out of county, because I know that question will come up. We got some out of county discussions that's there, but I understand the DOC and the funding question. Yes, sir.
Was there a proposal to put on the third floor that building that you currently have was designed for?
So that was actually brought up last night, and we have run into buildings like yours. It was designed in 85 to go up a floor. What has happened in those situations is that the codes, when they were built, and the loading that was there, when you consider the loading of what a jail floor has to be, all of the masonry and all the steel that goes in there, those don't support that floor. And I don't know if you caught the beginning, but if you would add another floor, you would add another linear jail, which essentially would add 3 more staff posts at $1.5 million a year annually. So discussion about multiple ways to renovate was kicked around, but it came back to, it became a staffing component.
You can operate that on about 50 years. They make up for your.
Actually, no, we'll get into that as long as we're here, because it is.
Good question.
It's a question that's been brought up, right? So, as you look at the staffing component that's tied into that, your jail right now runs on a budget of just under $1.9 million, okay? $1.5 million of that is staff, okay? The other side of that is this out-of-county housing, and we'll get into that, because people will say, well, let's just ship them out of county, okay?
Yeah.
Some people will do that. Some counties will ship some of their inmates out of county, right? I see a lot of you going, yeah,
What's wrong with it?
right? Here's the situation that you run into. There is no guarantee that counties will take your inmates. They don't have to. So you may find a county right now that will take an inmate, and they'll say, yep, send me a check. I'm happy to do so.
Are we taking anybody in to our facility?
We'll get into
From
all
like
yeah,
Chippewa and Eau Claire?
we'll get into all that. But the individual, the county may say, one county may say, yeah, we'll accept you because we got some beds open right now. But the moment that something happens in their jail, or they decide that they're not going to house our county anymore, they will call you up on that day and say, come get your inmates, we don't want them anymore. I had that happen to one county. They had 15 or 18 of their inmates out of county, and they had 4 of their jail staff quit. They could not man their jail anymore. So they called up and said, get us out of here. And they had to come and get their inmates, and then start to disperse them elsewhere, because they didn't have room in their space. The reality is that those counties don't have to take your inmates. And to take that one step further, those counties don't have to take certain of your inmates. The counties that they take your best inmates. They don't want to take the bad ones, because they're a headache to them. So now, you have to deal with that component that's tied into that. Now, when you start to get into out of county, and we'll talk about the staffing that's tied into that, the challenge with your staffing is that when you say, let's hire 3 more staff, that's $1.5 million, that is added onto this number, because it's already there. So it's even bigger. I was proposing that it was 1.29. It's even bigger, so it's north of 3.1. You can do the math. It's probably close to $3.5 million.
That's the interest on the,
Nope, this is operating. This is what we're paying staff.
what's the interest on the whole ball of wax every year?
Okay, we're mixing topics, but I'll answer your question.
Okay.
Your borrowing of $38.5 million with principal and interest is $61 million $870,000, $61.8 million is all in, okay? Over 20 years, you've got it paid off, you don't have to pay anything more on that. This operating expense that's here, whether it's out of county or you say, let's add 3 more staff, this number right here becomes $3.5 million, you can't borrow for that. So how do you pay for it? How do you pay for that number?
Raise the taxes.
Gotta raise your taxes. You have to raise your taxes. Raising your taxes, this number right here of $1,249,000 is gonna be real close to that 73 cents to build a building that you have to raise your taxes to pay for your operating expense. Now, there is another option. You can then cut services from the rest of your county. So you can cut $1.3 million of your services from your county. Which services do you want cut? That's the issue. You cannot borrow for that money, and you don't have the money in your budget right now to pay for it. So when you're talking about, am I gonna spend 73 cents per thousand to build a building, or am I gonna spend 73 cents per thousand or thereabout to either hire more staff or spend them out of county? Those are your options.
So you said, how much was it for 3 people? 15, or
It's
1.5 million?
It's a 3 post, so every staff post that's in the jail, one is master control, one is a rover, one would be at the booking. Somebody has to be there 24/7. So you have somebody there 24/7, 365, which equates to 5 people here, 5 people here, and 5 people here. And depending on how you deal with holiday and all those components, it may actually be more than that, depending on how you do it. And there's equations, whether you're running 8s or whether you're running 12s, it's a whole equation that you get into, but I like to summarize it to it's about 5 people. So now you're paying that, it's salary, benefits, all the things that are tied into that element, those cannot be borrowed for. And that's the challenge that you're up against. So those configurations in which you get into operating and whether you get into borrowing, those are the difficult situations. And I hope you all understand the heavy stress that your board members have. It's not an easy decision. And I think most of them probably don't want to make it. But it is something that's before you. Sir, you had your hand up first?
Yes, what is the prisoner growth projected in the next 10 years for this project?
So it's an interesting discussion because when we got to look at your history, you averaged about 40 inmates over the course of the last 10 to 20 years.
That's 40 a day, or?
No, we call it ADP, average daily population. So your population does this. On a given day, somebody gets out, somebody gets in, somebody gets out. Your average daily,
Okay, yeah, what is the average?
your average daily population is about 40, right? And we'll get into whether it's electronic monitoring or not. Somebody will say, let's just throw them on a bracelet. Yep, get them out, throw them on a bracelet. If you do put them on a bracelet and you send them out, you still have to have a bed accounted for them. Because what happens if there's one event that they break their protocol, they have to come back and there has to be a bed for them.
So, but what is the projection?
Yep, so I'll get to that. If you look at what the increases were, it was increasing gradually. And when we looked at over 30 years, because we did a 30-year projection, we ended up being in that 60 to 70 range, right? If it increased as is. Now, what you will look at on history, and it's not just in Rusk County, it's across the state, when COVID came in, COVID did this. All of the numbers dropped. Everybody did it. But now COVID, are we past COVID? Now that we're dealing with getting back to somewhat normal, now you will start to see that it's starting to climb back up. So right now, we have shown a 60 to 75 bed jail. We actually, at one point, we're talking about 80 to 85, and as we were dealing with ad hoc, I gotta tell you, your ad hoc team, if you guys wanna raise your hand, they put us to school on how can we cut these corners? What can we do here? What can we do there? Did a great job, right? And I believe that 60 to 75 number is a number that is going to be able to deal with your population potential growth, but it's not an overbuild, okay? A gentleman back here asked about, are we housing out other counties? There are some that want to build this big jail so that they can bring other counties in for revenue. Never a good idea to size it to that, because if that goes away and other counties don't need them, you've overbuilt for your population. So right size it, right? But if you build your jail and you open it up day one and you have a double bunk of 75 and you can get to 85% of that, the reality is you're probably gonna have 10 to 15 beds that you could bring other inmates in and make some revenue. But don't use that as your basis of sizing it, and we haven't.
But isn't that prison growth also dependent on the population of
Nope.
the county growth?
That's a question that comes up all the time, is that our population is declining.
Yeah.
The reality is that your population in your county has some impact on it, but the reality is there's others that can come into your county and they will participate in an event, so it's better to go off your EDP. Okay. You have a comment, question?
So, we've been losing some staff for law enforcement, leaving, retiring, going elsewhere. We're kind of tight with that.
Yep.
Building a new building, how are we gonna keep these officers here? How are we gonna keep them here if things keep getting taken away from them? What's your proposal to keeping staff here for that building, the new proposal?
I guess
What's in,
I'm sorry, I'm not.
Employee retention.
yeah,
Okay, so I guess I understand what you're asking, but I don't know what you mean about what are we giving them? Are you talking about, what's the building enhancements to encourage them to stay? Or, I'm sorry.
no, I guess it's just the benefits on the side, you know.
Oh, are you talking pay and all that?
Pay benefits, yes, so if
Okay.
we're losing staff.
Yep.
What are we doing to keep that staff here or have them come to us for employment to staff this new building?
Okay.
That's my question.
I guess I'll answer it, I'll let the sheriff add on, but I can tell you, well, he can deal with the wages stuff, I'm the building guy. But I will tell you that what I have found is that when these new buildings are constructed, because the safety is enhanced, individuals that are in a, I don't wanna use the term compromise, but something that there is potential of risk, individuals will go from the older building to the new building if it's an adjacent piece, just because of that. Now, benefits is obviously gonna be a much bigger piece of that, I don't know if you wanna address that, or how you wanna address that?
Benefits are something that are discussed with the county. I don't personally get to decide what the people get paid or what their benefits are. That's a negotiation with the county, with the employees. Our wage in the jail is not terrible. You know, we're always on the lower side of it, and we probably always will be. We don't have the tax base that Barron has, or Eau Claire has, or Chippewa. You know, they have all these cities and things in theirs. We have Ladysmith, and then we have all the villages. We beat our head against the wall every day, trying to say, well, what can we do to keep people here? What can we do to bring people here? I understand your problem, and it is a problem.
So,
We don't have that answer.
I do wanna add that the proposed building would not require any additional staff. So the count would remain the same.
Okay, so the old building versus the new building, how many, like, observation cells are there? How many segregation cells are there for, or are there any?
Oh, yeah.
In the old building?
I think right now we're at 21 classifications.
How many more would be in the new building?
18 classifications, and I think we have 10, observation cells, call them special needs or whatever, and then receiving, we have 8. So instead of the 2 that you currently have, we'll have 8 in the 14 area.
You have a comment?
Yeah, there's one more thing I wanted to add to the employee retention piece, and I forgot when it was. At some point, the entire sort of building team had taken a tour of a number of other sort of newer jails that either Venture has worked on or the Samuels Group has worked on, to show the Rusk County team sort of how these newer pod layouts work. And George had a couple of his jail administration staff along, and I think one of the telling things was in the first jail that we had gone through, to sort of see the look on their face of being like, whoa, so our job could actually be like this. They were very, I don't want to say excited to that effect, but there was a point of interest for them to see that the physical environment that they work in wouldn't hinder them performing their job. They were seeing the potential of how this could make their daily work a lot easier and take those pain points away. So that was something that was impactful, that we didn't make any notes or anything of it, but it was just a very impactful moment that we didn't see.
No, one of the things I did like about that is the pod aspect of it, rather than the always, because the pod overall is safer for the employees.
Just much more.
Question here.
So you say 73 cents per thousand, but then you showed the big 8% difference. Can you break that down to the 73 cents per thousand? So if it goes
So
up 8%
I
for borrowing, bring it back down to 1,000.
I may have confused you.
No,
This was construction, the 8% was just construction, it wasn't
Right.
interest.
right, but it still adds to the whole cost of the project. So if we don't do it now, we do it later,
Oh.
8% raise. So right now it's at 73 cents per thousand.
Oh, right,
If we were to pay the 8%, how much would it be per thousand?
I don't have that number, but obviously you can see that the cost is about doubling in 10 years. So every year that you do it, it's gonna go incrementally more. So the longer you delay it, the cost of construction will go up. The variable that's in there is the interest. So your interest piece, if your interest shifts by 1%, one way or the other, it can have a significant impact. And he just has a forecast of what the sale of those bonds has been, he's projecting it in the future, right? I have seen some right now that the sale of those bonds has been in the upper threes. So we believe that he's got conservative numbers in that interest, but who knows what's gonna happen in the next how many months, right? So variable. You were first.
So, when you're getting your money, like going for the bonds, are they locked in
Yes.
at the completion or at the beginning of the construction?
So the way the bonds work is they will actually distribute them for the sale of the bonds, and then those offers will come back to the board through the financial advisor, and they can make the decision of which one they're gonna award for the sale of those bonds, and that's locked in for the life of that borrowing. Now, if the interest rates go down, the county can then go in and refinance that. So let's say that you borrowed for 4, and 2 years from now it goes back to 2, like it was crazy 4 years ago, you could refinance,
So it'd be locked in for the,
20 years.
okay. And then how long would the construction take?
Right now, we have about a 2-year construction period. We would need about 10 months to design it, 2 years to build it. So you're talking almost 3 years before you're gonna occupy.
So I work for the Department of Corrections, and one of my concerns with this is the LGBTQ plus, whatever it is nowadays. Within the past 5 years, I have seen a male inmate who identified as trans. The DOC actually put that individual in general population in a male prison, celled up with another biological male. Now, my question is when did they actually say that you guys are out of compliance when the DOC has been out of compliance themselves, if that's the case?
Yeah, I don't know specific to your situation or who did that. All I can tell you is what the classification process is in regards to how you separate them. And I will tell you that population in general has been something that's been difficult for them to manage. I don't know your specific situation, but all I can tell you is that they have to be compliant in regards to but let's be very, very candid. Some of them, that changes daily, right? That's where it complicates that individual and your officers to say, let's separate them and isolate them.
Are you referring to a state facility?
Yes.
Yeah. So there is a difference between jail, a whole different set of statutes, and I agree with you, they are completely different. But they have to comply with for the jails, not prison systems.
Okay.
So I have one
I
question
don't
on that
understand why they have to be
line of
different.
people
Shouldn't be.
about that letters.
Go ahead.
So do we have to subdivide that down into each of those, whatever they're claiming they are?
So, maybe.
Go ahead, you take this one.
Because, I mean,
So let's say we have somebody come in, a male come in, says I identify as a female, okay? We now have to, classify them as that, and we have to house them by themselves, okay? Let's say tomorrow, somebody else comes in, a male, says he classifies as a female. we can't put them two together. We still have to classify them separately because we don't know. That's what makes it difficult.
Think how happy you would make them if you put them all together.
I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying we can't do that.
I'm talking about whether, we're saying if they're like queer or gay or trans or, I mean, each one of those. Do you have to divide each one of those separately?
Yes.
Everyone.
Yes.
And if they identify, why can't you put them together if they identify like these guys with the same crimes?
Okay.
You got the same equipment,
Okay.
identifying is the same thing.
Well, they say-
I'm not saying I disagree
They
with you,
both said they were.
but I'm saying that that's not how the laws are now. We live in a way different world than when I started. I mean, it was the male, female, and if you were male, you went in there, female, you went in there, and you dealt with it.
You know,
But that's not how it is anymore.
It still is.
That's what makes it very, very difficult for my jail staff to have to classify these inmates. It's very difficult.
Will this new, address that? Will the new jail address that?
It will give us more room to do that.
Can you
Would
tell
you
that?
say 18?
18 different ones.
You'll be able to have 18 different classifications in the new facility.
But one of those people would take up 5 pods.
Nope,
No.
not how we have it, not how it's,
Well, you
Right.
showed it in the pods.
That was a diagram,
That's
this
just
is
an
a
example.
schematic
Yeah.
of what it was, we have it split up, and I think our largest is 3 cells. We go from 1, we have, I don't remember how many exactly, but we have single cells, we have double cells, and we have triple cells.
So you said if we went in that one corner, it would take up 5
Right,
cells.
but
It would
this
take
is
up
not
five.
the actual layout of what it is.
This is only
If they would take
diagram.
up three. Or
Oh,
three.
3
They
instead
would
of
take up
5.
three.
Okay.
This is
So
not,
one
this is
person
not your
takes
floor
three.
plan, this is just a
Yeah.
generic one, but.
Because we don't wish to give up the floor plan of our jail.
So the way that,
Okay.
when
For
Corey talked,
security reasons.
when Corey talked about it, we will have 18 elements that would be there, and then there's 10 special needs, so that's another separation. And then those receiving cells down here, it gives you an opportunity so that you have multiple places to be able to separate them. So it will give you a very extensive opportunity to classify where you usually do not have that.
And with
So
part
the
of that,
smallest would be like 2,
I'm sorry, what?
would the smallest area be like 2?
Yeah, we've actually got some that are
So
one.
singles.
Can you, with, I mean, to be able to open up and shut their
Yeah, wait,
dead space? Yeah.
sir, you,
What's the square footage of the new jail compared to the old? When you talk about maintenance, how much is it gonna cost to heat and cool compared to the old jail? It's
Good
gonna be
question.
more than 1.3 million.
I think you're at 46,000?
Something like
And
that.
what's the old jail?
I don't know that off the
The
top
old
of
one
my
will
head.
be heated yet, but it's part of the courthouse, so there's gonna be all additional costs to maintain.
So the discussion about utilities, it's typically $1.50 to $2 a square foot for utilities. When you talk about maintenance, what I have seen, and I don't know what your current maintenance staff is, I don't. But counties that build a new facility of this size, it's about a half of an FTE. So they may have to add a part-time or full-time, whatever that, if they're at a half-time now. And the cleaning or housekeeping, more times than not is done with an inmate worker. So it's not that you're bringing on house, and I don't know how George would run it, but I would think an inmate worker would be able to deal with that. But you're right,
I'm just talking utilities are gonna go,
Yes.
just the utility bill,
your utility costs will
water,
water.
heat,
It should
air,
be more cost effective, I would think, compared to 40
twice the
or so.
size.
So how full is the jail now?
Where we at? Upper
We're at
30s?
31 this morning.
Okay, 31 this morning. But it fluctuates weekly.
Do you have to ever ship any out?
Right now, we are not. Probably should be, but.
Well, right now, it's under control, it's just a.
Well, that's the issue here is.
I would tell you right now, and I probably shouldn't say it, but you're not compliant right now. But I do think that, I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but budget drives a lot of that. So here's what happened, this is the out-of-county expense that I didn't really touch on, that was going in a different. I want you to understand what out-of-county expense looks like, and I'll spend just a few minutes if you're all okay with it. Sorry. So, based on, you can take the number off, but based on your daily expense that a county will charge you, I've seen some that are in the mid-40s, I've seen some that hit $1,000. it depends on the situation. $1,000 is an anomaly, right? But this $65 is a pretty decent average in regards to what you would pay out of county. And then on top of that, where out of county starts to become a real complicated situation, is that the transport, you have to transport those individuals to wherever that is. That Jeff doesn't have staff to do that, the cost to be able to get them, and the way that works is, if they have to go to court, you gotta go pick them up, take them back. You gotta go to see the doctor at the clinic, you gotta go pick them up and bring them back. Is it the county that you're housing them? All you're doing is you're sending them there, and you're paying for the room and the food. Everything else is an added expense on top of that. And again, all of these costs over here go right to your operating costs, you can't borrow for it. So when I was talking about the scenario of adding staff, this is the exact same way. And this is if you had 40, right? So if whatever that number is, you gotta be able to deal with that, and if that inflation piece continues to add, I just ran a quick number, that if you started with this number this year, and you put a 3% inflation on that, over a 40-year period, if you said we want this jail to be a 40-year solution, and what the 40-year cost would be, it would be over $90 million that you would pay in out-of-county expenses. It adds up very, very quickly in regards to all the expenses to be able to get that accomplished. And I don't know if you wanna add on what you don't have or what you'd have to do to get that accomplished.
We don't have the staff to be transporting daily back and forth all the time. Yes, sir.
So I do have a question. What is the cost of using a program like Lock and Load?
What is it a mile?
$2.65 a mile.
So George, it's one of the things that we talked about with George, of what the incidents are and what they use for lock and load. And we had the numbers in regards to what one of these transport trips would be, because we were trying to get to what is a median cost. He's had some of them where he used lock and load where it was a $1,300 ticket. And that's just one trip. So it's not cost effective over the duration, but it might be something that they use for one event. But it can be an expensive component that's tied to that.
We do use them on occasion, especially when we're short-staffed, on long distance transporters. So we do use, there's a couple different ones, Lock and Load, Talon, and another one. But we do, but we try and keep it in the county, the money in the county with our employees. But when we're short-staffed, sometimes vacation, sick time, holidays, we don't normally always have the staff to make that 12-hour run, so.
Any more questions?
So that new building, is that a one-level jail or two?
So, you're gonna watch
Like
me
you
go
said, it
through.
was two-story.
So everything is one level except for the housing, and maybe you wanna explain how that works?
So the housing pod itself, when you get to the diagram, when you see.
You want the diagram, or do you?
Yeah, go to the diagram.
I mean, they could put like 7 of those diagrams.
You just gotta be faster on the bus.
Here's the officer station that's raised up. This is 2 stories, and there's like a catwalk or anything, but, so it's 2 stories. This is all open, so that officer can see both levels. So it's kind of like a split level, but it's 2-story housing, and the officer is just raised up to see both levels.
Everything else would be single story. So the only two story, when you saw the rendering that was there, that was parked right up against Minor, that was housing, and everything else stepped down. Yeah.
So even with 2 classifications, male and female, how does this layout actually prevent them from seeing each other across the way? I understand it's 2 floors, but you know, you can look down.
So here's the day room fronts.
Okay.
We use mirrored glazing, so they can't see out, you can see in.
Okay.
As well as the officer station, and like I said, it's raised up, so like if you're crossways, you can't see across that.
Okay.
So there is the male and female separation as far as, sight and sound.
Okay.
Great question. Any other questions?
So where's the dispatch gonna be? Are they still in the middle there?
Dispatch right now, we're actually looking that it may very well be down in the booking area. Would be a shared, because we've got it shared, we don't wanna separate it. I mean, the best thing to do would be separate it, but for budget purposes, it's gonna remain the same for this model.
Yeah, this is just jail, the sheriff's department, PD, that
All
won't
that's
change,
staying.
that's all staying the same, this is just.
We're only talking jail and jail support, which would mean the intake and the kitchen and laundry. Other questions?
Who has the final say on this, or county board, or does it go to the referendum?
Great question. That's a county board decision. Again, the county board members have the authority to make this decision. Most counties that I've worked with, I haven't had any boards that have taken this to referendum. And the reason for that is that there is a process in the state of Wisconsin that gives county board members the authority to make that decision because of all the details that they are privy to that most taxpayers weren't, right? And the example that I would give you is if we put this to referendum and we let all the taxpayers know about this meeting, and I thank you all for coming, but there's a lot of you that didn't come. And that individual that goes to the poll to vote immediately would say, I'm not spending more money, close it down, but they don't know all the details. Where the model is the board members know the details, they know the budget, and that gives them the authority to be able to do so from the law. Now, it's a board decision. They can decide whether they want to vote on it or whether they want to do a referendum. That will be something they decide in the future. The other side that I explained to taxpayers is that your county board makes those money decisions every year when they authorize your annual budget, which is millions of dollars. And those things don't go to referendum. So it's kind of a tie in regards to what does that look like. But that's why we're doing this, to promote dialogue between you and the board members in transparency. The reason that we have implemented this model to be able to explain this to communities, because we deal with a lot of county projects, is we hear so many people say, we didn't know about it, we didn't know about it. This is letting everybody know what's going on, and that those board members have a difficult decision to make. Not gonna be an easy decision to make. I think we can all respect that. Yeah.
But you said this is gonna grow our county hasn't grown in 20 years. You said this project will grow the city and the county.
Yeah, I need me to take that.
We go back 30 years, I don't think we've grown in 30 years.
Yeah. You guys are good listeners. That was a big time.
Re-listening.
What, he's taking notes, he's gonna change it.
Delete, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things, what we're talking about that.
Went down 2,000 people in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
3,400 to 3,200.
The population side, that's what I was referring to, is that there's not a direct correlation as to the number of people that are in the county. It's to deal with the activity that is going on.
For the taxpayers, all it is, we're meeting the codes and helping the prison, making it better for the prisoner, but none of us are gaining by it.
I understand that.
If you go there, it'll work out for you. If you go there, it'll work out for you.
Yeah. The only big winner is gonna gain from it. The criminal, it's always for the criminal's benefit.
I do understand the frustration of that.
Everything's for the criminals.
So my question is I'm gonna be honest with you, looking at this thing, it's kind of an eyesore. We have not the prettiest town on the planet, but we have some nice older buildings. Our courthouse from the outside is a nice looking building, and we're about to go to prefabricated concrete in the middle of town. And now we want, honestly, I find it kind of insulting that it was showing off this little county, or this little square right next to it. It's honestly hideous. My question is the county owns land all over. Why are we putting it right there?
Great question. So there was actually a discussion about a greenfield site. Let's just put the jail somewhere out of town. We didn't pick the site, but just find a place out of town, park it, which could be a decision that's made. Talking about the transport, now you have to be able to get those individuals from jail back over to the courthouse for those events, and it starts to complicate that. There's safety and security in transport. I know people say it's minimal, but it's there, and there's also an expense to that. Where in this model, they're literally walking across the street to get to court. And some of them, in regards to how the configuration is designed, that staff component that's tied into that is minimal because it's an extension of the jail. So your suggestion there, obviously board members have heard that, we'll let them know. And you're not the first person, people say, get it out of town. That's something we'll let them know, that understand we have a need, but get it out of town. There are different things that make that not efficient. and the connection of the courts and the tie with,
So-
one of the other things that I've heard is that if there is an event in jail and the correctional officers need assistance, but the sheriff's office and staff are not right adjacent, how quick of a response can you get into that jail? So there are things that are considered that way. But this minute.
So why not make it a judicial center that has your court system and your jail and your officers? We also have a city that we house right now, city police officers. What are they pitching into this? I mean,
My next question.
I'm not saying that we don't need a new jail, I'm saying that this design makes 0 sense in my mind.
Great feedback, Doug, we will let them know. All I can tell you is that the reason that this is being considered, because the question has been raised, is that the moment that you make it a justice center, you're gonna about double the cost. So, well, I can tell you right now that we have bid them out, because you have to take all the square footage in regards to what that component would look like. So dollars is what's driving that. Next. Yep.
Okay, so I kinda heard a little bit in there of what I was gonna ask.
Of the city paying for it?
Yeah, about the city not paying for it, but assisting in it,
A
because it
chip in.
is a county and city jail. The city inmates are being housed there that are arrested by city.
Yep. We'll let the board know that, it's a question.
Okay, and I have another one.
We're gonna cut you off pretty soon, no, I'm just kidding.
Okay, so my question is how many inmates do we have sitting waiting for court dates right now? Like, how many of them are actually waiting for their court date? Lots. My question is would it be possible to have a second judge in the county of Rusk to actually expedite some of these court cases, to turn the burden over to the state, or turn the people loose that are found not guilty, so we can reduce population in the jail and make proper adjustments with bedding in the jail and save us all a buttload of money?
How is that gonna help recidivism? They're gonna keep coming back in.
Not if
That-
you have an extra
This is about housing these guys. I'm saying actually get them into court. Do we want, okay, so at this rate, what we have is we have a whole bunch of guys sitting on their keisters, they're not working, they're a burden on our economy, we're paying for that right now. Every person in there, we're paying for. If we were to get a second judge to actually run court separate from the court we have 2 courts going, we could start turning them out further. They're gonna go to the state, which is a completely different budget, and it's going to either turn them loose if they are found innocent.
That's a super good idea, actually. That's a super good idea, but then you have to deal with the state, because the state is the one who assigns judges to counties, and the state's not real easy to work with.
I'm aware of that, I work for them. But at the same time, I think that's an idea we should take somewhere, because honestly,
Great
So
comment.
the other issue is the lack of attorneys in their caseloads.
that is actually a fair thing, because we have how many attorneys in Rusk County? 3, 4?
You're right.
But, you know, I'm just thinking that it's something that we could possibly look at, because how much does it cost per year to house an inmate? For the state, it's in the tens of thousands to house a single inmate per year, for medical costs, food.
30,000, I looked it up. Wisconsin, 30,000.
Yeah, it's not cheap. And that's something that we're all paying for, and that's just money that's being flushed.
How's the prisoner in Wisconsin,
Well,
So explain to me when you're saying turn them over to the state,
Well, state
after they
prison.
go to court?
Yeah, so I'm saying if we were to be able to secure a second judge in the county of Rusk, we could stop housing people waiting for court as long and possibly cut that time in half.
Well, how many of
Because
our prisoners go to state?
What's that?
How many of our prisoners go to state?
Oh,
10%.
maybe 10% of county inmates end up in prison.
what happens to the other ones, probation, or?
Probation.
You've got probation, that's turning it over to state community custody at
You
that
put on
point.
probation, violate probation, come back to jail, extend the probation,
Yep.
get out, come back to jail.
And that's a problem we can't solve here.
I don't wanna cause trouble, but you probably get an idea of what's up if we had a show of hands.
Go ahead for.
For or against?
Oh,
I mean, it's just a small segment, but.
Yeah, I don't care if you do that, I mean, essentially, it would be nice if you guys would communicate with the supervisors, and I think that's what we wanna promote here. Is take some time, digest what you've heard tonight,
Yeah.
and then ask more questions. I mean,
Well, we've been listening, I think
I
everybody's.
appreciate that, I appreciate you all coming out here and being respectful. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that, cause some of these don't go as respectful as you guys have been treating me, so thank you. But what I would encourage is please talk amongst yourself. You probably heard something here today that you didn't know, and you've gotta consider that. I think it would be good for you to digest that and then talk to the board members. Send things into the website. You have the contact information for the board members. Sir, do you have a comment?
Yeah, so you gave us a total of $61 million, which,
That principal and
that's
interest.
$3 million a year for 20 years.
Mhm.
Is your 73 cents on the $60 million total, or is it on the $38 million total?
No, it's on principal and interest.
Okay, so it's 73 cents per thousand on principal and interest.
Correct.
As long as our interest rates don't go up.
Or you're locked in.
You're locked in.
Only if you borrow only if you borrow all 38.5 million at once.
Correct. Well,
If you borrow it over time, there's a possibility those interest rates change.
yeah, and obviously he has that in for a projection, right? So what will happen, to explain to you, if the board approves this, they will then have a borrowing authorization that would then allow your financial advisor to go out for these bonds, and when they come back in, they can put together a strategy of whether you borrow it all at once, whether you do it over a 3-year period, a 2-year period. There's obviously different components that are tied into that, so you're right. Yep. Yeah,
So what happens to the existing jail that's already there?
currently, right now, the existing jail would remain vacant. There is nothing scheduled to be done in there. Now, that is brought up at a board meeting about what could we do with it? If that's the direction of the board to say we want to create that into something, that would be additional cost that's in there. But right now, it would remain.
A portion of it will.
Yes.
Will be used as where the skywalk comes across to get to use the existing elevator that we have now, rather than putting in another elevator. Part of that will be renovated to get to that elevator.
It makes noises, but it works.
We've not had to get anybody else.
Be utilized for that court vote. So as we cross, there's court voting.
Yeah, you're talking here.
So I'm sorry, I do have a question. Is there any assistance that's gonna be given to the Flambeau River Outfitters to help them relocate in any way, shape, or form in the area? Because
I guess that's not a question I can answer. That would be.
As far as we know, they've never even been notified of this. They know of it, but not notified of it.
Yeah, and I think it's mainly because there hasn't been a decision made about whether it's happening or not. But I would think obviously that would happen
Really?
in regards to consideration and discussion. And we will take that back, the board understands that, as well as the comments that we've got about the adjacent properties. Definitely information that's good for them to hear. Okay? Yeah.
Sorry. So if this doesn't pass, if they say no,
Yep.
what happens?
If it doesn't pass, the DOC is going to come in and they will shut your double bunking down. So you'll go from 52 beds to 18 max, which means that you will be full at 12 to 13. You will then have to start doing out-of-county housing to the number of whatever that is, at the cost that we just showed you there. So more than likely, day one, it's gonna be about a $750,000 hit to your operating budget, day one.
And how much time we're gonna have to decide this? Or how much time the deal?
Well, the DOC right now is working with the county because you're working on an option, right? So if they come to their board meeting, whatever the board determines that they're gonna make the decision, and it's a no, that's when that will kick in.
So something's gotta be done, whether it is.
Yeah, as much as you hate to say it, you have to do something, right? That there's gotta be something that's done, it's just a matter of what's the outcome.
Will the option new or fix the old, which is not doable?
So how close is the $38 million? Is that gonna be covered?
So when we put the pricing together, that was if we got it bid out in this calendar year. If that shifts into the next year, we've gotta deal with inflationary factors, right? So that all ties into the decision that's made. The sooner you make the decision, the sooner it can be designed, the sooner it can be bid out. So that's the key component tied to that, is the timing of when you approve it and when you actually get started. You're
If
next.
you remodel the new, or the current building that we have, how many beds would that be?
The best day would be 38.
Maybe they're in 18 or 12.
It is, but there's other factors in there. You'll be losing some of the support spaces. You won't have those. That's just remodeling the jail, just to get the housing in there. Program space has to be increased, so once we touch it, that whole thing has to be updated to the current codes. And one thing that wasn't mentioned, I think, last night, if we remodel the jail on the second floor, everything on the first floor has to be brought up to code as well.
And there's the, while that work is getting done, there's the other structural component, which is the county boardroom, the Ladysmith PD, and the sheriff's office all have to vacate for the time of that remodeling.
And those operational ones, do they have to be in the courthouse, or could they be other places, say, an empty clinic?
But then the transport cost
Not for operational, though,
comes in.
right?
You'd be talking about jail supported. Jail supported, is what
Yeah.
you're talking about. So it would need to be on that campus, because
It would need to be, okay, that's what I didn't know.
Because at that point in time, jail support would be underneath the same as everybody else in the county when they're in need of a law enforcement officer. It takes time to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions? Lots of good ones. So, moving forward, we got another meeting tomorrow night in Ladysmith. And then, we will be presenting, an update to the board in April about how things went. And then they will determine when and if they wanna make a decision on this. So, again, I would encourage you to, communicate with them. You can, again, feel free to go to the website, send us some information. If you have questions that you think about after you leave, feel free to send it to us, and we'll do our best to get a response to you.
And the website has all of the information that all of the county board supervisors have been provided to date of that information. So relative to full transparency, there's nothing that you aren't seeing that either, actually, there's probably more on the website than I think we've shown here tonight relative to jail inspection reports and all of that.
Jeff
So-
just reminded me something, because some people were struggling to get onto this. If you put this address into Google or another search, you're not gonna find it. This has to go into the address bar. So type it into your address bar on your computer or in your phone, and then you'll get to it, because Google doesn't recognize us because we're new. So you have to put it into the address bar. Yes.
I just have a comment, for all the people that are here, saying what they wanna say or listening to what they wanna hear. You do have several board members that are listening to you right now, just so you know that, and if you don't know who they are, you guys wanna stand up. So you know, you have several board members here that are listening to what you guys are saying.
I wanna commend the board members for coming here, because I have done this many times, and, there's not always that attendance. So that shows you that it's important for them to hear what you have to say, so I appreciate you guys being here tonight.
I see all these board members here, they got $1 million they could throw at this. Don't ya? I know about it.
Well, I wanna thank you all again for coming out tonight. Thanks again for being so respectful, and, appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I mean, why